So, welcome to Markers and Milestones, where we explore educational opportunities for young men and women beyond traditional college, all from a Christ-centered perspective. I'm Lee Bortons. I'm here with my co-host, Amanda Kleist. Today is Wednesday, December 20th, 2023. It's the end of the year, and I forget where I am and when. But it's Wednesday, December 20th. We're joined by Ben Merkle, who's president of New St. Andrews College in Idaho. And let me tell you, he's a great example of why classical Christian education is so coveted by so many families. Let me just read you briefly his background. You can see the variety of interests that he has. He's a fellow of theology at New St. Andrews, as well as he has a DPhil. So what's DPhil stand for?
It's
Doctor
a
of Philosophy.
fancy way of saying PhD.
Yeah, it's in Oriental Studies. He's got a master's in Jewish Studies from Oxford. He's got a master's degree in English Literature, a Greyfriars Letter, a BS in Education, and chemistry was one of his minors, and also in history. And he attended the University of Idaho, among another number of colleges. So thanks for joining us, Ben.
Thanks so much for having me. A real privilege to be here.
Good. Good. So generally what happens is I ask some logistical questions about what you're up to, and Amanda listens and moves into the theology and philosophy as we proceed and get to know you better.
Great.
So we have this show, Markers and Milestones, so that parents and students who are trying to figure out what are the ways to transition from home and childhood into adulthood. And they can know there's so many other ways besides just going to the local community college or state college, which I know you, in agreement with us, try to steer away from those. So we like them to know both Christian colleges and what they're doing really well. And yours, of course, is exceptional, as well as the trades and just career and missions and military and all those kind of things. So we had you on because you have obviously are the leader of one of the best known, most respected Christian classical colleges in the United States. And thanks for your time being here. Could you tell us what makes New St. Andrew so exceptional?
Yeah, there's a number of things that are quite distinct about NSA. We were started in Moscow, Idaho in 1994. Logos School was started in Moscow in 1981. And that's where kind of a lot of the beginnings of classical Christian education start to emerge. You get Doug Wilson's book in 1990 on the Recovering Lost Tools of Learning. And then NSA was started in 94 really as a next step for kids coming out of Logos School, or basically kids coming out of that classical Christian pipeline that in the early 90s was just beginning, but now is kind of over exploding all over the place. So we're really designed as a school to be a next step for kids coming out of that classical Christian K-12 education. I think that's one thing that's distinctive about us, is especially the fact that we offer just one singular undergraduate degree in liberal arts, and it's designed to really make the best out of the classical education and take it through, I think, what the college degree for that tradition was always really meant to be. There are other things about us. We are one of the few schools that refuse all federal money. We say no to student loans, Pell Grants, and all of that in order to keep ourselves free from the entanglement of the federal government, but also responding to the price signals of the free market. Another thing that I think is really distinctive about us is how clear we are on our faith convictions. I think we're one of the few places that is not as scared to say really clearly what we believe into the microphone. And I think that that's something that's missing from our Christian colleges. I mean, we have these institutions that are all about, we're supposed to be breeding the leadership of the church. And I think we do not do a very good job of teaching them how to lead, or we don't give them an example of what real leadership looks like. And so we have a strong conviction that we're going to be as clear as we can on important issues that are in front of us.
Yeah, so I heard three big things. Let's unpack a little bit. The first one was that you offer a degree. Explain that. Justify that for the parent who's never, a liberal art degree, why?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think it's because over the last several decades, and it's been brewing for a while, but we've really had a transition in American understanding of higher education where we see the purpose of a college degree is simply about vocational certification. And therefore, we associate the name of the degree that you get with the job we think you want to get. And so we process degrees by, does that degree name sound like a really good and well-paying job? And if it doesn't, then you're kind of scratching your head, why would you do that? So if somebody gets a degree in liberal arts, which is what we offer at NSA, you're thinking, well, then you're going to be a liberal artist for life. And like, that sounds like, would you like fries with that kind of degree? So it's a little bit perplexing, but I think what we're trying to do is go back to, and I think that you would understand this well from the classical Christian world, that there are certain core skills of the intellect that developing those are far more worthwhile and pay much greater dividends, not just on vocation, but certainly in your career field, but also in your development of your family, your engagement with your community, your engagement with your church. There are a whole host of skills that are not actually being taught in school anymore and are more formative and more important than I think what a lot of our schools are actually passing on. So we're looking at critical thinking, ability to communicate, creativity, just some things like basic things like diligence, honesty, integrity. Those are the things that we're working to instill. And we find that the liberal arts curriculum, which is this ancient educational tradition of using certain distinctive disciplines to cultivate those critical thinking skills like philosophy, literature, history. Those kinds of things help you to think at a level that I think a lot of our current colleges are only treating on the very surface level. And we're getting to the heart and to the core and developing those core skills. And what I find when I talk to CEOs in the workforce, they'll say, listen, college graduates are worthless because they've got these pieces of paper that identify certain skills that they supposedly know how to perform, but they show up clueless. They don't know how to work. They don't know how to think. They don't know how to listen to what I want them to do and then actually say it back to me. They're missing the core skills. And it's the liberal arts curriculum that was always designed to inculcate those. So that's what we focus on.
And how has that held anybody back? Like, what's the results of your single degree in your students?
Yeah, I see. Gosh, it's remarkable how, if your concern is that these kids won't be able to get jobs, it's remarkable how highly sought after they are. The number of CEOs that I have emailing me regularly saying, can I get students from your school because I need somebody like that? It vastly outnumbers the number of students that I have. And I think it's really interesting, the workforce that we're looking at now, because of the way that the transformation of the workforce by advances in technology and whatnot, we're not really looking for that one single skill set that you'll inhabit for life. It's far more necessary to have somebody who's creative, adaptable, ready to perform the skill that there's not yet a college degree for. Where do you go to get people who are adaptable, able to teach themselves to think widely and to move laterally, not just vertically? I think you need a degree that's far more like what we are producing.
So address the parent who says, but my child knows they want to be a brain surgeon.
Yeah. So one of the things I always try to make really clear is I think anybody who gives you a one size fits all, path for education is just selling you something. So at NSA, I believe that we fit we have one thing that we do it well. And I think there's a significant market of kids for whom we are exactly right. But I don't believe we are for everybody. And there are certain things that you need a specific vocational degree for. I think there are certain engineering careers that you just have to get a particular degree that NSA can't give you. So I don't pretend that we hit them all. I also don't pretend every student ought to go to college or every high school graduate ought to go to college. I think that we overvalue or we inflate what the college degree is supposed to do in order to try to get all of these kids when they don't need to go to college. They just ought to be going and getting a job or an internship, apprenticeship, something like that. So I'm not going to pretend like we're the path for everything. I think we're a path for one particular crowd of kids. That said, we're now at a place where actually an NSA undergraduate degree plus a couple of other undergraduate courses, which you could get at a nearby university, will get you into medical school. So we've had a number of our students actually going on to medical school. It is something you can do from NSA. I don't think you can do engineering from NSA. I've seen kids do it, but they're having to do it way more extra years of undergraduate work than I would recommend. So I don't think we're the best for that. But medicine, we actually are starting to be able to fit that.
But something I would recommend, and tell me if this is true or not, or if you agree with it, especially if you had a child not particularly go through a classical school through high school, I would say almost no matter what it is they want to be next, they need a few good years in that time of transitioning from youth to adulthood to review Western civilization and
Yeah.
theology and the various things you offer. They could go for 2 or 3 years, and if they really want to go into medicine or engineering, quit then, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, absolutely. And we've seen a number of kids do that. The world of higher education and the way credit transfer and degrees work and all that, it's not always the most fluid. So yeah, I absolutely think that we could add a lot. I don't know that the mechanisms of degree transfer make it very easy for some people.
yeah, I just wanted to point that out because, like, for someone like me, I don't really care about the degrees or the credits. I
Yeah,
really care about the education the child's receiving. And then, of course, as they get older, sometimes they know better what they need to be doing.
it'd be nice if more people thought that way.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so the second thing you brought up was funding. And I
Mhm.
really appreciate how NSA, as well as Doug Wilson and Logos, have partnered with Classical Conversations to stand against all the intrusion of federal and state funding coming into the school system, changing public or private schools into public schools. So when people hear that you're not going to be taking, funding and Pell Grants and all those kind of things, how is the college affordable?
Yeah. So first of all, college, the cost of college has just gone up exponentially in really ridiculous ways. But if you do a deep dive into those budgets and see where is this money going, a lot of it is not being spent on the actual educational product. Well, it's being spent on lavish campus amenities. That's a big piece. Your football stadium, your student rec center, lavish dorms, and all of that. And that's really, it's about establishing this kind of resort-like 4-year existence that you'll be able to go to for 4 years on for the price of your student loans. And so that's about winning student enrollment, not actually providing student learning. So if you as a prospective student go and visit a university, I think it's a really interesting thing to just keep a track of what are all the things I spend time looking at. What do they want? What does the recruiter want to show me? And it's shocking how many students will go to a university, will spend a whole weekend there taking in university life, and they will never once go to a class, which tells you that's not really, you're not really paying for the education. You're paying for the amenities, all of these other things that are not just, they're not the thing that you thought you were paying for. A lot of it is actually actively subverting your education. It's taking your eyes off of your study. It's taking your time away from the work that supposedly you went to college to do. So it's strange that by stripping a lot of those things out of the budget, we actually improve the product. Because what we're saying is, my job is to give you 4 years with a bunch of scholars who are going to really challenge you and press you, working through some of the great texts, which is actually surprisingly affordable. Like you'd be surprised how actually you can create that moment at an affordable price. So a big piece of it is just being disciplined and focus on our actual product.
And then what's your student to teacher ratio?
Oh gosh, that's one of those facts I'm supposed to always have like at the top of my head. I mean, we try to keep our classes very small. You're not going to sit in a class, a lecture ever of 250 students with a professor that you'll never actually meet and just a TA that runs your rotations. You're in actual classes with the professors. I really press our provost to make sure that the vast majority of our instructors are full-time PhD instructors who are actually lecturing to the class. We don't maximize adjunct teaching, which you can do for really cheap, but you're not getting the actual educational experience we like. So our classes will all be, you'll have somewhere between 15 to 30 students in a lecture, and then you'll have in small recitations, typically it's you with the professor and there's maybe 8 students in a recitation like that.
Okay, so what is your tuition, and is this by year or by semester? How do you guys
The tuition for a year at NSA is 15,700. And that's for the whole year. That's tuition. It's not your room and board. So you got to figure out your room and board on your own. But tuition is 15,700.
And explain that on your own part to parents that don't know.
Yeah, that actually is another kind of distinctive of ours, is that we say we don't do dorms, we don't have residence hall, and we don't have a cafeteria or a meal plan or something like that. A lot of people will say, well, that's because you're so small, you can't afford it. That's actually not the case. For a lot of smaller schools, the residence halls and the meal plan is actually how they make the year profitable. A lot of these schools are losing money until they figure in their residence hall and their meal plan revenue. That's how they actually become profitable. So when you get accepted to a school and they tell you, oh, we want you to live on campus for the first 2 years, and they'll say that it's something like, because we want you to get used to campus life, or you want to get you enculturated here. The real reason is because they have to fill out their dorms in order to be profitable. So they'll require that dorm. We don't do dorms and we don't do the residence hall, and because we could make money with that, but we feel it robs our students from the steep on ramp to adulthood that college ought to be providing. I see a lot of colleges where these kids they live 4 years on fake money, their student loans, in a fake little city, this campus that they never leave, and we say this was about preparing you for adulthood, and they suddenly walk out and they've been living in off cafeteria food. They've not driven more than 2 miles from campus. They actually have been secluded, sort of sequestered from reality. And so a lot of this failure to launch syndrome that we're seeing in this next generation, a lot of it, I think, is being imposed upon them by the way we treat them in college. So at NSA, we say, go find an apartment. We're not going to sort that out for you. Go find the grocery store, figure out how to cook, figure out how to get your Wi-Fi hooked up to your apartment, figure out how to pay bills. And what we found is that by the end of college, their sense of ability to take responsibility for themselves, for their finances, for their obligations in life is so much higher than what we're seeing coming out of many other colleges. I've not ever seen an NSA graduate not just go out and get a job, because that's just what they've been doing this whole time. The number of our graduates that move straight into marriage and starting a family with kids is so much higher, because they're not trying to pay off student loans. They're not trying to figure out what it means to be an adult. They've already figured that out. They're not still wondering what they want to do with their life, because they have a clearer sense of that. And then probably the biggest thing is that we do not have a weekly chapel service. We tell the students that we want them at a church somewhere in town on Sunday, not on campus. We want them to go and actually worship with people who are 75 and people who are 2 years old. We want them to worship in the body of Christ and know what the body of Christ is like, and be matured and mentored in that context. And I think that's just really important to do.
So that was your third point that you opened up with, was that we talk about Christian formation at college, and it doesn't seem to happen. And you feel like you guys have a better success rate at that. Amanda, do you have some questions in relation to that?
Well, so one, I love the fact that you're saying go to the local church, because that is a life skill for every time you move and every time you set up your family again. And it does take practice, because many of our families, the kids don't remember how their parents found the church. So it is has been modeled.
I think it's really tragic when the years 18 to 22 are some of the most formative years in your life. And imagine taking those years and stripping those years away of any Christian examples that are older than 22 years old. Imagine, like, this is during that period that, a lot of these kids are really starting to think about what they want in terms of a marriage. Imagine trying to walk through what I want my family to look like with no sense of what Christian maturity past the age of 22 might look like. I think we radically stunt their growth by not putting them in the context of the full body of Christ, so that they actually have the real mentors that they need during those years.
I appreciate that. So my question, because I sit in California and Los Angeles, and we measure in millions, how big is this town in Idaho? Yeah. And what is the relationship between town and gown? Because you've just said we throw all these 18 to 22-year-olds who are practicing learning to live into the community.
So yeah, you bring up such an interesting question. Moscow is a very interesting town. It is home to the University of Idaho, which is where I graduated from. It's just a few blocks in that direction. So the town itself is, I think, around 25,000, but you have 8,000 University of Idaho students here. So it sounds really small, but it's your quintessential college town. You really are going to a college town. Main Street, where I am right now, our campus is on Main Street. This is a row of coffee shops, bookstores. This is where it's kind of made for college students in one sense. And then if you go 6 miles in that direction, you hit Pullman, Washington, which is about another 30,000 people. And that's home to Washington State University, which is about another 20,000 students. So it's small and rural in one sense, but it is full of college life. It is your quintessential college town, really. I know prospective students often feel like, okay, I'm going to the middle of nowhere, northern Idaho, where I'm going to sit in the howling wilderness and read Latin by candlelight at night. They're a little bit terrified that like I'll have no social life whatsoever. This town is so bursting with life. There is something going on at all times. There are study parties, all going on at all times. So it's a very lively town. It's a unique town in that you have a very vibrant Christian community. Just in the churches that are associated with our denomination, there's probably 3,000 people meeting on a Sunday morning in this town or immediately around it. So it's a really, really robust Christian population. But the town, because it's a university town, is very liberal, which makes for just some really interesting dynamics that some of it can be friendly, some of it can be quite tense sometimes. I've found that for me, having my kids grow up in that has been so good for them in that they know they have a really rich community, but they also know what it is to have to own their faith in the face of real opposition. Some of the things you probably followed some of the COVID stuff that went down in Moscow. I think we're probably the only college I know of yet. Maybe there's another one that still I need to meet, but I don't know of any other college that made it through the entirety of COVID without ever requiring masks or vaccines. We just did college, and that could get tense in our town. But I found that particularly just watching my own kids learning to own their conviction in front of a town that felt very different was so good for them. My kids have been raised with a far greater personal courage and ability to stand for what they believe in the face of opposition than I had growing up. I mean, it was something I'm having to learn as a 50-year-old man, and then I'm watching this become just second nature to them. And it's actually really a blessing, and I think kind of cool.
That is a beautiful thing. And the courage of their convictions, it also means, my next question is, how diverse is your student body in terms of their convictions with such a strong view?
Right. It's funny, in some ways we're very diverse, and in some ways very kind of unified. So I'll hit a few different categories. Just in terms of geography, it's surprising actually how few of our students are actually from the Pacific Northwest. It's maybe a third of our student body is from the Pacific Northwest. They tend to come from all over the US, and we have a few international students, Korea, Mexico, some from the UK, and then a couple from Africa. So we'll have a little bit of an international, and then kind of a very wide and diverse throughout the US. Our NSA is theologically a Reformed college. So faculty and staff all would sign an evangelical Reformed statement of faith. We do not, students have to know that that's the perspective that they'll be taught from, but they don't have to subscribe to that. We do require that our students be evangelical Protestant. So we have a pretty diverse group of students from Baptist to charismatic to Anglican to kind of all over the place. But we want them all attending one of the local evangelical churches. We don't say which one, so most of them would probably tend to attend one of the Reformed churches, but their number will go kind of all over the place. The one common denominator that I tend to see is well, about half of our kids will come from classical Christian schools and about half from homeschooling of some variety. Well, actually, I should say like 45 and 45, and then there's 10% that kind of fall out of the sky. Who knows where they came from. But the common denominator tends to mostly be they had some form of classical education. That seems to be the common background that brought them to say, I kind of want to do something like NSA. So they tend to be evangelicals with a classical education and a taste for cultural engagement. Like I actually believe what the church is teaching me, and I want to stand up against the world and these things. And I think when those three things come together, you've got a student who's right for NSA.
Let me ask you, because I'm just curious. Classical Conversations is obviously very ecumenical because it's all family run versus staff like you guys have. And so I get asked a lot about college. Do you see any downfall or negatives by not having a more diverse faith background, by being all Protestant without a good mix of some Catholics and Orthodox in there also?
Yeah. So I mean, I personally, I have good Catholic friends. I try to associate broadly and whatnot, but I like having a clear theological spine. And I mean, even it's funny. I was talking with my Catholic friends not long ago. We were talking about this. Like, I prefer a Catholic who really believes what they believe and wants to tell me I'm wrong. I prefer that over somebody who's trying to be, too agreeable. I prefer that kind of disagreement. And at NSA, having at the size that we are, having that kind of common core allows us to go a little bit deeper. I don't think that I would want that requirement at the K-12 level. So I wouldn't want to freeze my associations for life always at this one level. But I find that at this moment where we're trying to get certain things really drilled down and established, it's helpful to get kind of specific for a little bit. And then to like I said, I don't mind having personal friendships and whatnot that cross some of those chasms. That doesn't threaten me at all.
Do you feel like you could accomplish the same thing with a really strong staff, but if the students were more diverse? Like
Good.
I totally agree with. I'm actually, I don't disagree
Yeah.
with you on anything, but I
Yeah.
totally see why your leaders have to be what you say they are, or they're not leaders, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes they're children; they don't even always know what they are, or what they believe. So
Yeah. I think you could. I think you could. I just know this is the way we've done it, and it's worked well for us. And I kind of want to hang with it for a while because, like I said, just getting. I just don't think you see very many places that are really clear about what they believe and know how to own it all the way down. And the fruit that we get from saying, listen, we have a particular worldview that we're working to develop and apply out in a number of different areas. Having clarity about the sort of foundations of that worldview has allowed us to get a lot more done.
And you've talked about the size of your school, but what is the student body?
Yeah, so we're a teeny little school. Our undergraduate this year was 272 students. We'll cross over 300 this next year, and we'll continue growing for a while. I want to always stay as a small private Christian liberal arts college, but I think we could probably grow quite a bit from where we are right now. We, in the last 4 years, doubled our undergraduate. So 272 sounds really small to most people. To us, it feels terrifyingly large. But we're continuing to grow that.
And then do you have any thoughts on men only versus and women only colleges versus, I know that you accept both sexes?
Yeah, that's a really I see that one thrown around a lot, and I think it's really interesting. I think that I mean, I'm very big on the distinctions between men and women. I understand the importance of the distinction between them, but I also take God's statement, it's not good for man to be alone. I take that very seriously. I think that there's something that's really important about us living together and playing off of one another. I think it's great to take the guys out and play rugby with a men-only rugby squad and be men. But I think it's really good for them to step back in the room and have them understand women and I think men understand themselves more when they understand themselves in company of women. There's been one thing that informs me a lot on this that is a big reason why I feel this way is when we spent a lot of time in England doing my doctoral work. We were at Oxford, and it was really interesting looking at the English education system has a long tradition of the boarding schools where K to 12, you're completely separated, boys over here and girls over here. The English evangelical church really dug in on evangelizing the men's boarding schools. And so you had a high proportion of the men that came out of those boarding schools who tended to be the guys who went on to Oxford or Cambridge. So the boarding schools fed the Oxford and Cambridge schools. And because the English evangelicals had really focused on those male boarding schools, a disproportionate number of men at Oxford were young men who were Christian, evangelical, sincere men who had come from boarding schools and are now doing their degrees at Oxford. And what I noticed was a shockingly high, disproportionate number of them for whom they really, really struggled with gender and sexuality. And the English evangelical church had a weird problem with that compared to anything that I saw in America. And as I talked to the guys there, a lot of them, it all went back to the boarding schools. They had not, some of those formative years, they had not learned what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman. And they had, I think, got twisted in strange ways. And though they were sincere believers, it was something that I think really stunted their growth and made life very difficult for them. I think that God made us to be together, and there are times and seasons to separate, but I don't think that should be permanent.
Well, I wonder how much of that's because they actually were at boarding school and not in families.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that's a piece of it. England had some weird ways of doing things that you would just think, I just can't imagine, sending your 7-year-old son away to go to the boarding school, say, teach him to be a man, bring him home when you're done.
Yeah. But we have the history of Christian missionaries doing that too, which was not appropriate either. So Amanda's been to school and hung out in those campuses where you were at. Where did you go, Amanda?
So my husband's PhD is out of Cambridge, the other school over there. So what college were you affiliated with, Ben?
I was with Christ Church.
Christ Church. Okay, so he was with Claire. So one of the things I noticed on your website is that you have 3 houses, which looks to me like you guys are nodding towards this type of experience. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we have 3 halls that I mentioned earlier our doubling our enrollment in 4 years, and how 272 sounds small, but for us it's shockingly huge. And for a lot of our alumni, I mean, one of the things that was at the very heart of the thing they most loved about NSA was the ability to be a part of this small, quirky little academic body, and they really wanted to never see that go away. I believe that NSA needs to grow just for scale of economy and to be able to weather challenges that are coming. I think that we were previously at a size that it could have been taken out far too easily. So I felt like we needed to grow, but I wanted to preserve that small cohort of academics. So we have started this 3-hall system, and currently those halls are strictly extracurricular. So each hall has a rugby team, each hall has a women's volleyball team, and they do different things like that. But the goal would be to slowly move the academic program into those 3 halls and to be able to move them into 3 colleges in 10 to 15 years, so that you would have the Oxford Cambridge model. I think there's something really powerful about that, to have the small little college of 200 scholars working together, but a part of a larger university that allows you to have the economy of scale, and all of that allows you to be a small little body, but also to have like your arch nemesis across the street that it's really your closest companion, but it's right now it's like the people I hate the most. And that that competition, I think, is good for everyone. I think it's good for students. I also think it's good for faculty to have another institution across the street that I'm trying to be as good or better than them. I don't want to see our faculty insulated and not having to compete.
That
That's
sounds
a
like it might lead to fraternity houses and sorority homes and dorms. Do you see that coming?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the fraternities were the old Greek system was in a lot of ways, it was modeling off of what was going on in the UK in the Oxbridge model. But I think that I think keeping it as simply a extracurricular thing, I don't want ours to stay extracurricular. I want it to become something that is the academics themselves live inside of the hall. I think that will be really important. I think also with the fraternities, our halls are not going to be dorms. You're not going to live in them.
Have another marker in St. Andrews, which is a Master's of Fine Arts.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have our undergraduate is the bulk of the program, but we have several different graduate degrees. One of them is an MFA in creative writing. Moscow has been blessed with a strange richness in our local authors, and something that we have produced a lot of really impressive authors that have come out of Moscow, out of NSA. And so our MFA program is an attempt to then say, okay, let's see how many of these people we can take to that next level. So it's 3 1-week intensives over the course of a year, and I think you do 2 years to get through the whole thing. But it's been, the MFA is definitely our most competitive degree program. That's the one that's the hardest to get into.
Well, that leads to the question is, how do you get into St. Andrews? What do you need to do to become there?
Yeah, well, go to nsa.edu to start the application. If you go to the application page, you can see the requirements for test scores and those sorts of things. Generally, what I'm looking for is, I described earlier that kid who, enjoys being curious about the world and being pushed to the next level. I think that the classical K-12 does a really good job of grooming that kind of kid. So a kid who likes to read, wants to learn, wants to see more, and is ambitious to do something, I think NSA is a good place for, where that coincides with Protestant evangelical. And I think you do have to have I'm ready to work. I'm ready to actually really work hard. Our students are, in general, would be they're decently sharp. I wouldn't say it's only the intellectual cream of the crop. I think we have kids who are decently sharp. I think that you have to be at least at that level to do well at NSA, but who are ready to work really hard. I noticed that colleges are increasingly have a very low bar for what is expected outside of the class. I was reading a survey recently that it's something like the average college student is spending something like 5 or 5.5 hours out of class per week in studying. I think that's absurd. I think I can't imagine how incredibly low the bar must be when that is all it takes to get over it. If you come to NSA, I promise you're gonna be working more than 5 hours outside of class. And you have to be somebody who says, like, I want that. I want to be challenged like that. I want to sit there and see other kids that are getting something much easier. I'm going to delight in the fact that I'm being pushed a lot harder. And I think the fruit of it is I see in our graduates where you get a kid who's now his sense of full-time employment is 17 hours a week, going into the workforce, and is kind of shocked that they want him for this many hours and to stay focused for this many hours. We graduate students who are ready to actually put in a full day of work.
One of my questions is, how much outside for money work are your students doing in addition to the hours required for the classes themselves?
Sorry, you broke up there a little at the beginning. How
Sorry.
much just full-time jobs?
Work, like
Yeah.
for money, like to pay the bills.
Yeah. So that varies. I mean, it varies from family to family. Some parents are in a place where they can afford to send their kids and all of college is taken care of, and all they need to do is put in their schoolwork. And so we've got kids who are completely covered. But I really like the fact that NSA is the kind of place where I want our tuition to be at the level where a kid could work his tail off over the summer and hold down a part-time job during school and could reasonably get himself through school and not have any debt. And we still have at least half of our student body is like that, if not more. So I think the typical kid is probably working anywhere between 10 to 20 hours per week. It's pretty common for them to be working 20. My kids, their tuition was covered, but they had to get their own room and board, had to take care of themselves. And so my kids generally worked a 20-hour-a-week job through most of college, and they could do it. I mean, they're working hard, but it's doable. I think more than 20 starts to get to do NSA plus more than 20 hours a week starts to get a bit unrealistic.
So I want to turn the question to education in general. As a president of a college, I am sure you know a lot of other presidents of colleges, and very many smaller Christian colleges are going under. We just lost Magdalen College in New Hampshire this past year. New England is just churches and colleges are going under like crazy. You mentioned earlier at getting NSA to the place where it's scalable. And I'm just wondering what else, like, well, what do you see in the landscape? Why are so many colleges going under? And then what is NSA doing to make sure they don't?
Yeah. So I would probably tie it to some of those distinctives I gave you earlier. I think that colleges in general are chasing a broken financial model. And the only way that some of them will wake up is to go off the cliff and disappear. So they have inflated tuition. You have to take out massive student loans to get through. And then the ROI on the degree just doesn't seem to make sense. Seeing the push for student loan forgiveness is a big signal that a lot of people are not seeing the worth in their degree compared to the debt that they're carrying. And I think there's something wrong with the financial model. So trying to have an affordable tuition, I said, by not taking student loans, we want to keep our tuition inside of the price signals of the free market. That's something that I think that so much of education is just they're not listening to what the market can actually give because they constantly depend on federal money to step in and take away all of the things that are difficult about budget making. So I think that's one big one. I think probably the biggest thing to my mind is that we have forgotten or gotten confused about what college or even what education in general is actually about. Education really fundamentally is enculturation. It's about passing on from one generation to the next the richness of the culture that you've built. And what we've done is we've said education is about vocational certification. And in doing that, the difficulty is that you've told a lie because you don't need a college degree to get a job. And we're saying, so many colleges are saying, here are these degrees, you need these degrees to get those jobs. If you don't get this degree, you'll never get a job. You'll be empty and worthless and meaningless. And so you have to come and get this degree. And then I think too many people have peeked around the corner and seen that that's just not true, that you can get great jobs without a college degree, that you can spend a lot of time getting a college degree and then showing up to the job and realizing everything you learned at college has nothing to do with this job and it's not helpful at all. And it was a waste of time and money. And I think that too many people are seeing that, and it's emptying colleges of all of their marketing ability. Because what is it that I have to give you? If we were to step back and say, okay, no, college is fundamentally, or education is fundamentally about enculturation, then we would be saying something true. And I can go a lot further about what it is that I can give to you, why I think that that's worthwhile. Because I think I'd be telling you the truth and not a lie. But the other place where I think we see that lie is now we're seeing on a lot of these colleges where we thought it was vocational certification, but it turned out it was simply enculturation, but it was enculturation in a worldview that's fundamentally opposed to everything that I stand for. And I spent all this money to send my kids off to get this degree that I thought was about getting them a job. But what was happening is they were getting programmed in some woke ideology that undermined completely everything that I thought I was, raising them to be. So now I think we're seeing on all these college campuses, the mask comes off. You see that they're not really training them for jobs. They were just indoctrinating them, and they were indoctrinating them in this very hostile way. I think that we need to step back, understand what education fundamentally is, and then in a very sort of brave and purposeful way say, okay, so what do I want that to be for my kids? And I think a lot of colleges probably still need to go under, because I think there's a lot of colleges that are providing a product that actually parents don't really want.
So how do you think it relates to the decline in population?
Oh yeah, that's another big one, the birth dearth, which is really interesting. This demographic cliff that we drove off of, and what was interesting was I was seeing all of the media about this years ago. Like, this was no surprise; it was there, and what I saw was no college willing to admit that this was coming. And so it's so yeah, you have this birth dearth, you have this lack of students, which is there's going to be a survival of the fittest that eliminates a bunch of the colleges. But what I think is really interesting is, where's the birth dearth come from? Somewhere, 20 to 30 years ago, we stopped getting married, we stopped having kids, we stopped building families with multiple kids. And if we were to go back and say, what were the primary forces in that, I would say it was American colleges. We have the American college degree has despised the family, has despised femininity and the fruitfulness of femininity, and taken so many women turned their mind away from, I think, what is a faithful and beautiful life, and turned them to chase something that is kind of empty. And now we have the birth dearth. And so now the colleges, I think, are paying the price of this thing that they themselves did. Or how many couples did not get married and did not start having kids because they were paying off student loans. Student loan debt has had a huge impact on the formation of families, the beginning of marriages, and the beginning of having children. And again, that's colleges. So yeah, the colleges have to face the birth dearth, but what they're facing is what they did to themselves.
One thing is now expecting the federal government to forgive loans or to make college free or get involved in whatever way the states want to get involved. Is just going to continue those same issues for another generation or two as you pass the bucks on. So it's interesting how so-called most educated country in the world can't do simple math.
Yeah, it is. I think that there are a number of awakenings that need to happen in higher education, and a big part of it is we need to have the government step out. Like I was mentioning earlier, just this idea that your college degree equals a job. The equation of a college degree equaling a job is having that stuck in people's heads is one of the ways that the federal government so easily steps into higher education, because the federal government believes that they are responsible for our economy. And so by the federal government's involvement, they think that they can identify, this degree will give us this job, this degree will give us this job. And so by funding certain programs and whatnot, they think that they can steer the economy. And so what you end up having is, it's basically federal bureaucracies that are dictating the educational programs that are in front of us, because the federal government thinks that it's their job to establish all of these so that our economy can work. But that means that instead of having the free market call my skills into the workforce, which is the most efficient way to help me know where I am best suited, where I can best give, we have a bureaucracy that thinks it's responsible for making those determinations. And we end up with just a really convoluted and inefficient workforce and student debt everywhere. I think if the government stepped out of it, our understanding of what an education is for and how to best use it would be responding to the free market. And I think it would make a lot more sense at that point.
It never works when you give a child more money than they understand how to spend. So
no, that helps no one. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been a good talk. We're over time, Ben. We really enjoyed it. Amanda, do you have anything you want to end with?
Well, Ben, thank you so much for the time, and I appreciate the church emphasis that you have and getting into the local community, because that is a passion point for me. And I'm so glad to hear that you push people out to the church to start forming their adult
Oh, absolutely.
understandings.
Yeah, I preach. So at our church, I preach one of our services. So a lot of times, when I say I'm pushing them out, I'm just pushing them to me. But it does matter that I'm changing what hat I'm wearing. Like, you're coming to me as pastor and a part of the body of Christ, not this academic institution.
Well, and I appreciate what you're doing, Ben, not just you, but all at New St. Andrews. None of my 4 sons even went to New St. Andrews yet. They're all friends with somebody from there, and your staff and my son Rob running CC, they get along really well. So I just appreciate the
Thanks.
friendship.
We are especially appreciative of classical conversations. It is remarkable what a significant pipeline of really quality students you guys have become for us.
Good. All right. Well, Merry Christmas to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you.
Thanks. Bye.